The Yakuza franchise is Ryoga Gotoku's beloved series of open-world action games that slowly but steadily gain traction in the West. These games earned a reputation for their daring tonal balance of high drama and ridiculous farce, while the niche they found loved these games to bits. Yet in 2020, with the release of Yakuza Like a Dragon, the series abandoned its brawler origins in favor of a turn-based battle system, an allusion to the protagonist Ichiban Kasuga's love of the Dragon Quest games. It was decided that the brawler-style gameplay would persist in Yakuza's spin-off series, Judgment. Following the story of Takeyuki Yagami, a disgraced lawyer turned private detective, this new series focused more explicitly on issues of justice in Japan while maintaining the sillier content fans expect. I got the impression that this spin-off was met with skepticism from audiences, a cynical eye that seems to have persisted to this day. Lost Judgment barely had a presence in the larger gaming discussion, and it's sad to see such a phenomenal title didn't have the cultural staying power it greatly deserved. Stick with me, and I'll show you what a lot of gamers might have missed out on.
Time's up.
Detective Yagami's newest adventure is a much cleaner and meaner game than the original, especially when it comes to combat. Yagami's brawling controls handle so much more tightly now, leading to a smoother combat experience and better differentiation between the fighting styles. Crane and Tiger style made their return, but with greater focus on making them more effective in their ideal contexts. Because Crane style emphasizes sweeping blows that damage multiple foes at once, Tiger style now hones in on individual targets more directly. To compensate for a more narrow cone of damage, Tiger style has a charge attack that deals heavy damage to a single combatant, enough to either one-shot or knock them down fast. This charge attack breaks their guard, leaving them open to follow-up strikes, as well as an X attack that takes advantage of their sudden vulnerability. Tiger style has more stopping power than Crane style, whose combos can be easily interrupted by stray attacks. As such, the Crane skills give Yagami more dodging options during combat, as well as a speed boost earned by avoiding hits. Building up speed allows players to get hits out before the enemy can counterattack. When compared to the first game, Lost Judgment did a better job incentivizing players to pair fighting styles with specific fighting challenges. Then there's Snake style, the new combat stance. Since the last game, Yagami studied Aikido, hoping to use a lower impact fighting style, relatively speaking, on the criminals who didn't deserve to be clobbered beyond repair. As such, Snake style prioritizes parrying, disarming, and intimidating foes, the latter of which is just objectively hilarious. These new techniques also let us in on Yagami's sensitive side. He's more considerate of the people he's investigating, now that his reputation is clear and he isn't living out a gritty, self-imposed penance. Having solved the mystery of Emi Terasawa's murder, he's now free to race drones, play video games, and hit home runs, while eating copiously, drinking heavily, and dating problematically. However, most of the mini-games and auxiliary activities in Lost Judgment are contained in the extensive high school side story. Yagami is hired to investigate bullying at Seiryo High School, a prestigious academy in Isesaki Ejinsho, a district in the city of Yokohama. From there, he takes on two major cases. The first investigation is a hunt for the professor, a shadowy figure using the deep web to provoke student delinquency. The second investigation involves a connection between a sexual battery incident and a particularly gruesome murder. While the diverging stories are not textually connected, they share a thematic core, exploring the effects of high school bullying, the social pressures facing teenagers, and the way these circumstances both reflect and perpetuate corruption in Japanese society. Now's the time for the big warning block. First, some trigger warnings. This game talks a lot about sexual assault. I try to depict as little of it as possible, but it's part of the narrative and thus part of my discussion. I'm also going to talk about bullying, parental abuse, and suicide. Lost Judgment deals with heavy subject material, so please keep your mental health in mind before continuing. This is also your spoiler warning. Any story detail is fair game, but if you've made it this far, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel so you can remember to come back once you finish playing. While prowling the high school, Yagami has a humorous confrontation with the precocious student and Mystery Research Club president, Kyoko Amasawa, one that ends in him joining her club as an outside counselor. Together, their aim is to investigate the professor and figure out why he's been encouraging Seiryō students to skip class, misbehave, and endanger themselves. To learn more about these delinquent students, Yagami, 38-year-old Yagami, must infiltrate their social circles and parse out the professor's motives. Over the course of this side story, Yagami acts as a counselor for the high school's dance club, robotics club, esports team, and photography club. For students misbehaving outside the school's grounds, he also goes undercover at a skateboarding park, a hardcore boxing gym, a girls' bar, and a death race squad. Because these teenagers really get around. In typical RGG fashion, each club mission is packed with more action, sentimentality, and character depth than the average studio would think to put in their side content. From examinations of toxic rivalries and unhealthy competition, to the unfair and sometimes inhumane burden parents can place on their children, Yagami and the player take a hard look at the circumstances driving teenagers toward antisocial or even self-destructive behaviors. The investigations aren't just an excuse to pad lost judgment with minigames, they're a look into the inner lives of teenagers, teeming with ambitions but yoked by their internal and external burdens. Not that the minigames aren't fun, they are, but it's that perfect calculus of fun and meaningful that makes this game special. Incidentally, this is what makes high school such a rich vein for dramatic storytelling. In no other setting can you take so many wildly different people, force them to compete for social status and achievement, often irrationally, and then not have the whole situation feel farcically contrived. It's in this singularity of stress where emerging adults have to start formulating who they are. Social antagonism results from the adolescent conflict between their desire to belong and their desire to form an individual or group identity. This creates a strong compulsion to be included crossed with a social incentive to exclude. A pattern of behavior exacerbated by the biological changes of emerging adulthood and the taint of an unequal society. Plenty of high school bullying reliably stems from toxic masculinity, sexism, and classism, something I occasionally wish the game was actually more explicit about. It's in this miasma of abuse where teenagers encounter people who want to take advantage of them. In this case, it's the Neo-Keihin gang, the reorganized remnants of the street gang Yagami broke up in Kamurocho. They moved to Yokohama with the goal of cornering untapped criminal markets, each of the gang's 4 bosses having made contact with delinquent students. The coercive effect of violence, both interpersonal and institutional, is the final trauma that forces teenagers to disengage from healthy, pro-social functioning in society. It then becomes Yagami's job to guide them back on track. By taking on club missions, Yagami helps the delinquent teens confront their struggles. He encourages them to find better outlets for their skills, become team players, and even have frank conversations with their parents. It's challenging, it's emotionally exhausting, and it puts his life at risk, but at the end of the day, Yagami's pushing back against the lessons implicit in oppressive institutions. Keep a good image, don't draw attention to yourself, and don't inconvenience your superiors. It's the fallout of this culture of silence where Yagami finds the crimes of Akihiro Ihara. The Genda Law Office was hired to represent former senior police officer Akihiro Ihara in a widely publicized groping case. While his peers on the force wanted him to plead guilty for a lighter sentence, Ihara insisted on his innocence. Yet on the day of his sentencing, Ihara revealed the location of a body. Unbeknownst to the court, the maggot-eaten corpse of a man named Hiro Mikoshiba was discovered by a pair of Yokohama firefighters in that very location. Yagami must find the connection between these seemingly unrelated events, all while preparing himself for the secrets he'll uncover. Part of the fun in an RGG story is watching seemingly small incidences rapidly snowball into national conspiracies. with threads woven deeply into the fabric of Japanese society. I won't detail exactly how a groping incident, dead body, timid high school student, reserved high school teacher, confrontational handyman, and newly appointed Vice Minister of Health link together, but I will talk about how their interlocking fates represent the knock-on effect of growing up in a toxic high school environment. The power dynamics in high school are not isolated to that institution. Secondary education cultivates an environment that forces students to internalize the values and expectations of their society, or be shunned and bullied as a result. It empowers sadism in the privileged, traumatizes the sensitive or marginalized, teaches bystanders to stay quiet, and breeds resentment in the disempowered. Failing to protect others, failing to act decisively, or otherwise tolerating the oppression becomes deadly. Adolescents take these attitudes toward domination, retaliation, and complacency into their adult lives. Looking the other way and following the unspoken rules offers reliable, if tenuous, protection from the people who never stopped being bullies. Those who wish they'd spoken up earlier find new ways to pursue retroactive justice, though these methods are often self-serving and reckless. Vengeance doesn't fix a cruel society. It's an emotional demand for moral symmetry. I lost, I suffered, and now so must you. As you can imagine, this traumatic milieu inspires teachers, administrators, politicians, and police to take the same self-serving attitudes. Undermine their inferiors, close ranks during any investigation. The more power a person holds, the more empowered they are to pursue selfish gains and crush their opposition, especially through subterfuge. The social mandate of respectability and image maintenance makes the cruelty even more malicious, as bullies torture you while looking like model citizens.
If you do that, you'll be branded just another killer. That would be quite a fall from grace.
The ever-present gaslighting leaves psychological wounds as deep and painful as the physical. Of course, I won't overstate the rigor of Lost Judgment's critique. This really isn't a revolutionary narrative, preferring the more liberal catharsis of individual heroism. I mean, in Yakuza 0, Kazuma Kiryu becomes a nice landlord by defeating the bad landlords, while Majima's female staff rely on his magnanimity to stay safe in an abusive industry. It's a fantasy about being physically and morally strong enough to protect others from harm, but it never tries to remove the systems that create harm to begin with. I don't think there's anything wrong with a liberal power fantasy. It's a good thing to want to wield power for good. It's just not a realistic way for adults to go about advocating social change. However, Lost Judgment offers up greater complexity through its focus on societal power vacuums, as harmful institutions reform when no one addresses the contexts that create them. The comical example is the Neo-Keihin gang. Yagami beat these clowns up and down Kamurocho in the original Judgment, but once they located to a new city, all those ass-whoopings amounted to nothing. On a more serious note, the dissolution of the Tojo clan left a gaping hole in the criminal underworld. A lot of rough dudes without any leader to rally around. Enter Soma, a fiercely intelligent and dangerous criminal boss, concentrating all the ex-Tojo muscle under a single gang, RK.
Have I told you what RK stands for yet? It's Red Knife.
This new crew has the criminal ambition of the Yakuza, without even the thin pretense of honor or restraint. Soma gathered up enough loose manpower in Kamurocho to establish a small army, and a vicious one at that. Worse yet, this enterprising psychopath has connections in the government, corrupt officials playing power games on the taxpayer's dime. The kinds of white-collar criminals who outsource their dirty work to people like him. They need extrajudicial leverage against women like Reiko Kusamoto, the new Vice Minister of Health, who replaced Kaoru Ichinose after his arrest. Her anti-corruption platform attracted the attention of entrenched powers looking to protect their comfortable positions, and it wasn't long before they found the dirt they needed to ensure her complacency. Lost Judgment is mostly aware that big heroics aren't enough to enact lasting change, The game knows that justice needs to target the economic and political structures that incentivize crime, but it primarily wants to broaden awareness of Japan's social psychology. The corrupting influences of adult life are trained into the youth. Predation, competition, resentment, and opportunism become galvanized in institutional settings. And improving society involves unlearning those destructive patterns. That's why speaking up is such a prominent theme in Lost Judgment and in Japanese social justice groups. Announcing your unwillingness to tolerate suffering allows others to do the same, so individual outrage can snowball into collective solidarity. When more people hold the line against injustice, then the culture itself begins to improve and to expect more from its members. Keeping your nose clean and getting by with your reputation intact is explicitly framed as a concession to corrupt powers.
That's bullshit! You'll shut the lid on the trash, ignore the smell of the rot coming from inside and go on pretending it's justice? And then you call that being an honest cop?
Of course, not everyone is going to appreciate how this important story is told, and some of RGG's writing decisions are ones I can't justify.
Alright, let's go.
Whole sections of this game are overwritten, with about 3 times as much dialogue as necessary. Sometimes it reflects the level of care and attention that the team puts into engaging storycraft. Other times it's just an exhausting over-explanation of basic ideas. Thankfully, the game has an auto-advance feature that just lets the dialogue pass without your constant attention. It's not just the volume of writing though. The content can get questionable too. I'll be blunt. Kaito Sakikiba is the most fat-phobic character I've ever seen in a video game. Japanese developers have made good fat characters before, but the sheer malice behind Sakikiba is surreal. It's not enough that he's a slob in ill-fitting clothes who shouts, "It's showtime!" before showering his face with potato chips to charge up his super move, a belly flop. He's also a semi-articulate, developmentally stunted man-child with an infantile temperament, and any executive functioning he can muster is contingent upon his peers using food as a motivator, like a dog in training rather than a human being. Leveraging mainstream disgust at fatness is one thing. It's something else entirely to portray fat people as lacking any dignity, composure, or recognizable personhood. The joke with Sakikiba depends on endorsing the myth that fat people are puerile and undisciplined, while ignoring the environmental, biological, and psychological impediments to weight loss. It wasn't funny in Judgment, it wasn't funny in the sequel, and I cringed every time I thought of the writer who expected me to laugh. If Sakikiba appears unchanged in Yagami's next adventure, then the game should be called Poor Judgment. Secondly, it sucks that Uemamiya lied about the groping incident. Granted, the developers probably weren't endorsing the misogynistic belief that women make false accusations to manipulate men, punish them for their sexual conquests, or whatever vapid horseshit men's rights morons vomit onto the internet. The opposite is textually evident. Mamiya was coerced into faking a groping incident by a man who blackmailed her. But RGG knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote this twist. They looked at the momentum of the Me Too movement as women pushed back against sexual misconduct and the sexist society that blamed them for the predation of powerful men. They saw a similar movement break out at home as the We Too and Kutu movements promoted the same conversations in Japan. The organization Voice Up Japan was founded by Kazuna Yamamoto to advocate for legal protections against victims of sexual violence in Japanese institutions. Voice Up Japan even developed a sexual consent handbook to educate the public on respectful approach. After seeing all this, RGG wrote a story about how sexual assault and the outrage toward the man who committed it was actually a distraction from the real problem, another man's feelings. This was a deeply cynical tactic to make the story feel edgier. It took the incisive critiques made by Japanese women, women who risked their professional and social lives to fight for justice, and treated their concerns like a smokescreen obscuring more important issues.
Truly awful. And I do sympathize. I've also had to turn in an abuser like that.
And then they have the nerve to present this twist like it's a daring choice. Like, a woman lied is some radical new angle and not what most people already believe about women who speak up. Mamiya's reveal fails to treat the experiences of women with respect, and in a story about encouraging victims to speak up, that was a real lapse in judgment. Okay, so I'm sorry if the title jokes defang my critique, but they do help segue into the big, franchise-wide writing decision that may put others off. The oscillating tone.
Yori-chan!
Lost Judgment, like its Yakuza predecessors, is not afraid to blend intense, gut-wrenching drama with just the silliest bullshit you can imagine. One moment, you're locked in a fight to the death with a psychopath who just stabbed your friend, battling as he bleeds out on the floor. And in the next moment, you're owning a bunch of teenagers in a skateboarding contest. Some guy is about to chainsaw your arms off, but you need those arms to pilot a little robot for Serio High's robotics club. A lot of people just can't handle tonal oscillation. The jokes take them out of the serious bits, while the serious bits dampen the humor. Tonal consistency is a big part of how people appraise media, and tonal whiplash can be a major sticking point. That's fine. It's pointless to litigate personal taste to such a specific degree, but for my money, I love this writing style, and I think it's worth learning to enjoy. While the subject material itself can get intense, or in some cases, absolutely poorly handled, the entire project is still unified by its sincerity. The comedy, the drama, and everything in between blends better than you'd expect because all these flavors share the same earnest spirit. Very little in Lost Judgment, or any other RGG game, is ironic, sarcastic, or self-referential. This studio would rather be mawkish and saccharine than jaded or snarky. Yagami rants about justice because he's basically a born-again believer. His enemies think they're too important for the law, yet their presumed nobility inevitably devolves into selfish violence. These perspectives aren't just spoken, they're soliloquized in melodramatic splendor, a glorious hybrid of crime drama and Broadway musical. Internal Affairs by way of West Side Story. In all aspects of the narrative, there is motivation, enthusiasm, and the pursuit of a better home turf. This, to me, feels like the ethos of RGG's games. Cities are such a vibrant, dynamic, and just plain weird place to live. You meet all kinds of people who live rich inner lives beneath the silly impressions they may project into the world. The good, the bad, and the stupid all spring from the collective energy of urban life, from its conceptual brilliance to its numerous flaws. The apparent contradictions cease to stand out, instead rolling into a singular, messy, and ever-changing monument to humanity. Whether our hero is a hardened gangster, an obsessive detective, or an eager noob, they're all unified by a love of the streets that made them. The kindness and passion in their neighbors becomes the virtues by which they lived, while the cruelty, anger, and injustice became the aspiration to improve. RGG needs to be more introspective about how they portray the struggle for social justice, but it's evident that their drive to create and critique comes from boundless, authentic love for their home.
Good shit, man. You are a true gentleman. Huh? Hey, what the fuck? There's avocado on this shit. Where the hell did you get this from?
Heineke, if you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. In fact, that just leaves more for me.